Hi guys, it's Cindy from Cindy's Art. Today I'm so excited we're going to do an ocean wave. And the way I started my painting off with a 5x7 sheet was putting masking fluid down in order to mark the waves off. Then I let that dry extremely well. And then what I did was wet my paper and begin to put the first wet on wet coat of paint on. And in this area, I'm using cerulean blue. Marine blue is that dark one I'm putting on right now. I do have indigo in my palette. I have ultramarine deep, and I'm not using those yet. These lighter colors are more of a mix of cerulean blue and marine blue, and then the greenish tone is called horizon. And I love these colors. So I'm basically going to keep my paper very wet. I'm going to dab on the paint, and with a shoreline wash, you always have the darker lines towards the top where the deeper water is. And then as it gets closer to shore, you want to have enough lightness in that. But where that shoreline, where the waves crashing, it's going to be light enough where I can add a little bit yellow later on, because there's always sand underneath the water. So after I did my first wash, I want to create and add more vibrancy in, and the way that I do that is adding more paint in. Now here I am slathering on ultramarine blue, and again you can see how wet the paper is. I want it to run. When I dab paint on here, that's indigo. When I dab it on there, I want it to run, I want it to move, and I want it to mix the paint by itself. That's a marine blue that I'm putting on right now. And I will wind up putting in horizon, which is the green. That's what I added right there. And I'm going to let this continue to build up the color. I mean, look at that. That's our second coat, and it's very vibrant. Down in the sand area, I've used a tiny bit of yellow ochre, a tiny bit. And I use a little bit of gray of gray in there because this is more of a shadowy beach. There's not a lot of yellow in that. So right now, I'm using a rubber eraser to remove where that masking fluid was. I did that after I let my paper dry really well. To work on the sand area, basically I wet this down first. Again, there's a little bit of yellow ochre I'm adding in, and do you notice how I'm adding some of that yellow ochre into where the blue waves are? These are near the shoreline, so underneath those waves is sand. So I have to find a way to reflect that. There's a lot of yellow ochre going on, a tiny bit of neutral, which is that dark color that's underneath the wave. When the wave crashes, there's going to be a line right there. And this, again, this is where this dried. It's so light, it's so beautiful. And now I'm adding in a tiny bit of neutral to put right where that shoreline wave was. And then once I drew that line with a very thin brush, I took my larger fat brush and I had that damp. And right there, I've got that brush damp. And what I'm doing is lifting up some of the darkness. So it's not too dark, but I want that darkness right at where the wave crashes. So I let that dry. And then I've moved on. I've got permanent white gouache. I believe that's how you say it, gouache. And I'm using that to create the waves. Now, I've taken a lot of time to look at watercolor waves, to look at what lines exist there, how they are jagged and go in, or they come down towards the shoreline. And so a lot of this in watercolor will come from memory over time. Don't get frustrated in having to look at waves and lines and leaves and the darkness to find out where it is. After doing that, like for a year, 2 years, I'm in my third year, I think, maybe a little longer, of watercolor painting, but I'm only in 1 year of doing videos for YouTube. And after spending the time that I did, this is coming really fast now. So as I'm creating these lines, they're not all going to be white. You're going to see me take a little bit of my horizon color, which is that green, And you're going to see me wash a little bit over top of the white lines. And don't be afraid to do that. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just play with it. So the other thing I'm doing is a dry brushing. Right now, I'm taking this side of the brush. I have thicker paint on it. There's not a lot of water. And I was scraping it against the deep waves, and that's because I want to create little tiny bubbles. So right now you're seeing me switch into a gel pen. This is a Sakura gel pen. I used a size 8. I have a 10, an 8, and a 5. 5 is very fine, 8's in the middle. And what I'm doing with the Sakura, this was fun too, was I took it and again, I scraped it over top of some of the deeper waves to create little tiny bubbles. I had a lot of fun. You don't have to spend that much time doing as much detail as I did. I had a lot of fun doing this. Okay, now we're going to step back and we're going to take a look at this painting, and I have to ask myself, what does it need? And I took a few shots of the waves up close so you could see what they look like. They're coming up right here, and then I've got another one right here. And I just want you to see the depth. This is really developing well. Be sure to subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet. Would love to keep in touch with you. So I wanted to see what depth was in the water and what did I need. And I felt like I needed little tiny bubbles, you know, right where the water line comes and it's breaking on the shore. I did that through taking white gouache, and I used my thumbnail and I scraped white onto the paper. And that's how I created it. Now, right now, I'm creating sand, and I'm using my thumbnail. Again, you can use like a plastic card, a credit card you're not using, cut it up, and you can use it to scrape the side of a brush. Now, the brush I'm using is not soft. It's a very stiff one, and I use this for lifting up color, but because it's nice and stiff, I can use it to flick little tiny drops of paint onto it, and it creates a beautiful sand. So for you who are starting off in watercolors, try the card, try your thumbnail, and I'll have some other tricks that I'll show you in some other you know, pieces that I do or lessons that I do. So I'm finishing this up right now. I put a little bit of black in. I'm lifting it up with a tiny bit of water too, and I'm looking to see what else I feel like this needs. And I felt this was pretty good. I'm going to show you a few photos of the finished work so you can see them. But the color richness is good. You can see that sand in there. I gave you a few little snapshots up close. I feel like it came out well, and it's not too harsh. So join me, and I'll see you next time.